you, the cake ain't burned. It'll be done in a little while.
Ain't that good news?
Television in the 1970s was a mirror to a changing country, but a few episodes pushed boundaries so far that networks panicked. Local affiliates refused to air them, and furious viewers completely flooded the switchboards. These raw, forbidden stories genuinely shocked audiences, forcing immediate censorship that kept some off the airwaves for decades. Today, we are exposing 10 banned 1970s sitcom episodes you won't believe were aired. Before we unlock these forbidden broadcasts, hit that subscribe button and follow the Cumbadalgia channel right now.
Sister, you know the fat one? She had another facelift. Her skin is so tight now that every time she sits down...
Number 10. The Christmas episode local affiliates refused to air All in the Family 1977. Network executives always preferred their sitcoms clean and funny. But on Christmas Day in 1977, producer Norman Lear weaponized All in the Family to force holiday viewers to confront a brutal, real-world horror. In the legendary two-part episode, Edith's Crisis of Faith, directed by Paul Bogart and written by Bob Schiller and Bob Westhoff, the show took the unprecedented step of brutally murdering a beloved recurring character.
I asked you to come over here tonight to see. I said, sure he did. He called me up and he said, if you ask Norman, Norman will let you.
The victim was Beverly LaSalle, a charismatic 6'5" drag performer and comedian played by iconic entertainer Laurie Shannon. Beverly had previously stolen the hearts of fans in classic episodes like Archie the Hero, but in this 1977 broadcast, after having Christmas dinner with the Bunkers, Beverly was violently ambushed off-screen by a gang of street thugs. Upon realizing Beverly was a drag queen, the attackers unleashed a savage, fatal hate crime, bludgeoning with a lead pipe. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere on the soundstage was devastatingly heavy. Instead of delivering easy punchlines, Emmy winner Gene Stapleton gave a masterclass in dramatic acting, portraying a broken Edith Bunker completely collapsing into mourning and questioning her faith in God over the senseless murder. While CBS didn't formally ban the broadcast, a massive, quiet rebellion occurred behind studio doors. Dozens of local affiliates flat-out refused to air the holiday rerun, and the storyline faced extreme censorship in syndication for decades. The raw reality of a fatal hate crime treated with heartbreaking seriousness was simply deemed far too disturbing for a traditional 1970s sitcom audience.
Excuse me, may I?
Oh, James, that's nice.
Hit it, Willie.
Number 9. The shocking character exit that shattered a TV family Good Times. When Good Times premiered on CBS in 1974, it made history as one of the first network sitcoms centered on a stable, two-parent black family in Chicago's Cabrini Green projects. But by 1976, that vital piece of television representation was completely shattered. Behind the scenes, patriarch John Amos was locked in a fierce ideological war with producers over the direction of the show. Amos openly criticized how Jimmy Walker's character, JJ, was devolving into a buffoonish caricature driven entirely by the catchphrase, "Dine O Might." Instead of addressing Amos's valid concerns about negative stereotypes, network executives abruptly fired him.
I was going to be, recalcitrant to the end. You won't get me to roll over and cry for the job. No, forget you, man.
Rather than recasting the beloved patriarch, the writers executed a permanent narrative deletion. In the shocking Season 4 premiere, The Big Move, viewers watched in horror as a telegram revealed James had been killed off-screen in a sudden car accident. The emotional climax where Florida Evans, Esther Roll, finally breaks down, slamming the table and screaming, "Damn! Damn!" became one of the most raw, unforgettable moments in television history. The fallout from this forced script rewrite tore the series apart and alienated its core audience. In a desperate bid to replace the massive parental void, writers later introduced Moses Gunn as Carl Dixon, Florida's new love interest, and eventually cast Ben Powers as Keith Anderson to serve as a younger male lead. However, these quick fixes couldn't heal the backstage toxicity. Deeply demoralized by Amos's firing, lead actress Esther Roll staged her own protest walkout and quit the show the following season. Without its original anchors, Good Times irrevocably shifted from a boundary-pushing social commentary into a standard, catchphrase-driven sitcom. Number 8. The record-breaking sitcom Two Separate Governments tried to erase MASH 1972. When MASH exploded onto CBS in the fall of 1972, network executives knew they had a hit, but no one predicted it would become a cultural phenomenon. The series, developed by writer Larry Gelbart, was adapted from Robert Altman's Oscar-winning 1970 feature film MASH, which originally starred Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould. The television adaptation ran for 11 legendary seasons, culminating in the February 1983 finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, directed by star Alan Alda. That single broadcast pulled in a staggering 106 million viewers, a record for scripted television that remains completely unbroken. However, beneath the historic ratings lay a fierce political battleground. While the show was explicitly set during the 1950s Korean War, viewers instantly recognized it as a weekly, biting critique of the ongoing Vietnam War, triggering a rare dual-nation ban by the United States military and the South Korean government.
It was a very weird experience. We were hugging and saying goodbye, and there were tears and stuff, and there's all these people.
The first hammer dropped from within the U.S. Armed Forces, which banned the series from being broadcast on military installations, and the Armed Forces Network AFN. High-ranking Pentagon officials viewed the comedy's relentless anti-establishment philosophy as entirely corrosive to troop morale. The brass was deeply alarmed by the anti-authority antics of Captain Hawkeye, Pierce, Allen, Alda, and Captain B.J. Honeycutt, Mike Farrell, who openly mocked their superior officers, ran an illegal gin still in their tent, and strictly refused to carry firearms. Combined with Corporal Maxwell Klinger's Jamie Farr increasingly elaborate, cross-dressing schemes to secure a Section 8 psychiatric discharge, the show offered a weekly masterclass in military insubordination. The military absolutely refused to broadcast a program where the chain of command was framed as the enemy. Across the Pacific, a completely separate blackout was enforced by the authoritarian regime of South Korean President Park Chung-hee. Throughout the 1970s, South Korea was undergoing a massive industrial overhaul, and the government was hyper-focused on projecting a global image of a sleek, prosperous, and highly modernized nation. The weekly episodes of MASH, which were actually filmed on a set in Malibu Creek State Park, California, shattered that public relations campaign. The series realistically portrayed 1950s Korea as an impoverished, war-ravaged, and agrarian society filled with refugees and mud roads. Even though this was historically accurate to the wartime era, the South Korean government found the depiction deeply insulting to their national pride and banned the show entirely from domestic television. This unprecedented double ban highlighted the incredible political weight of the sitcom. It managed to terrify both the superpower military it satirized and the very nation where the story took place. Yet, the censorship ultimately exposed a glaring irony. While base commanders could successfully block the broadcast signal from entering the physical gates of a military post, they had zero control over the civilian world. Active duty soldiers and their families simply tuned in from their living rooms in the off-base housing communities just across the street, proving the government bans were completely powerless against the most popular show in America.
You know, Mr. Bunkers, you're a lucky man. You don't have to hang around schoolyards to pick up your junk.
Number 7. The 1977 drug breakdown Me TV refused to air in full All in the Family 1977. By November 1977, All in the Family had already cemented its reputation for pushing the boundaries of prime-time television under the fearless guidance of producer Norman Lear. However, the season 8 two-part episode titled Archie's Bitter Pill ventured into a deeply unsettling psychological territory that left audiences entirely cold. The storyline finds Archie Bunker, Carol O'Connor, utterly overwhelmed, exhausted, and drowning in financial depression as his newly opened bar, Archie's Place, faces imminent bankruptcy. Desperate to keep his head above water, Archie accepts a handful of unlabeled pep pills, which were actually illicit amphetamines from a well-meaning bar regular named Hank Pivnik, played by veteran character actor Danny Dayton. Behind the scenes, the production team knew they were handling highly volatile material. Director Paul Bogart worked alongside a unique writing team consisting of story editors Mel Tolkien and Larry Ryan, who took the extraordinary step of co-writing the script with an actual medical professional, William C. Rader, MD. The network deliberately brought a doctor into the writer's room to ensure that Archie's rapid descent into amphetamine abuse and his subsequent psychological withdrawal were depicted with frightening clinical accuracy.
I must confess that I have used that nasal voice in other roles. They weren't Edith.
The result was a performance from Carol O'Connor that completely shattered the standard sitcom format. On the uppers, Archie exhibits a terrifying, hypermanic energy, jabbering uncontrollably, sweating, and aggressively shouting about grand, delusional plans to expand his saloon across the country. But when the chemical high wears off, the episode takes a devastating turn. The inevitable crash plunges Archie into a dark, raw depression, culminating in the bigot completely collapsing into the arms of his wife, Edith Jean Stapleton, weeping uncontrollably in absolute despair. What made the broadcast genuinely disturbing for viewers was the show's total refusal to offer a clean resolution. There were no quick jokes to ease the tension, and the episode ended with Archie still profoundly broken, leaving the audience without the typical restoration of order that 1970s television promised. The lingering discomfort surrounding this narrative choice remains so intense that during a complete series syndication run in 2023, the classic television network MeTV completely skipped Part 1 of the storyline without any public explanation, broadcasting Part 2 entirely out of context and proving that Archie's dark turn is still too bitter a pill for networks to swallow.
You jerk. This is your heart.
Number 6. The 1977 sitcom premiere. Local affiliates refused to air Soap, 1977. In the spring of 1977, ABC executives got a sneak peek at a bold new primetime parody of daytime soap operas called Soap, created by visionary writer and producer Susan Harris. What they didn't expect was a massive, nationwide panic detonating months before a single frame of the series even hit public television. The firestorm ignited after a toxic Newsweek article wildly exaggerated the show's adult themes, falsely claiming it featured a scene of a Catholic priest being seduced in a confessional booth. Despite the fact that the article was written by a reporter who hadn't actually watched the pilot, the public relations damage was instant and catastrophic. What followed was 6 months of unprecedented cultural warfare against a new and aired broadcast. The United States Catholic Conference heavily condemned the show, and the Southern Baptist Convention's Christian Life Commission mobilized a massive 10-group coalition into an aggressive no-soap campaign. ABC's corporate offices were completely buried under a mountain of 32,000 angry letters, with a pathetic total of only 9 letters offering support. Terrified sponsors pulled their funding, forcing ABC to aggressively slash its prime time advertising rates from $75,000 down to $40,000 per spot, just to keep companies on board. When the pilot finally premiered on September 13, 1977, a staggering 18 out of 195 ABC affiliate stations flat out refused to broadcast it, while other local stations banished it to late-night slots past 11 p.m. and slapped it with one of the very first viewer discretion advisories in television history.
But we think that there's a long life for this character, and they talked about that he had a relationship with a professional football quarterback.
Behind the scenes, the cast, which included brilliant actors like Katherine Helmond, Richard Mulligan, and a young Billy Crystal, found themselves caught in a bizarre political crossfire. Crystal played Jody Dallas, one of the very first openly gay characters on prime-time American television. Ironically, Soap was aggressively protested from opposing sides. Simultaneously, religious conservatives boycotted the show for including a gay character at all, while gay rights organizations, including the National Gay Task Force, picketed the network because they felt the character perpetuated harmful stereotypes. Though the controversial pilot defied the backlash by becoming a massive ratings juggernaut, capturing a dominant 39% audience share on premiere night, the relentless, multi-year pressure on advertisers ultimately broke ABC's resolve. Susan Harris had originally designed a tight 5-season master outline for the show, but the network folded under the ongoing controversy and abruptly canceled Soap in 1981 at the end of its 4th season. The sudden cancellation left the brilliantly funny series mid-sentence, leaving millions of fans with a legendary, permanent cliffhanger where a main character faced an unresolved firing squad.
Stay where you are. Look, if there were anything wrong with Walter, I'd be the first to know.
Number 5. The rerun broadcast 39 local affiliates blocked from the airwaves, Maude 1973. When the groundbreaking 2-part episode Maude's Dilemma originally aired on CBS in November 1972, it made waves but passed with relatively modest public backlash. The storyline followed the fiercely independent 47-year-old Maude Findlay, brilliantly played by Bea Arthur, as she made the gut-wrenching decision to undergo an abortion. Developed by legendary producer Norman Lear, the episodes were intended to confront real-world issues head-on. However, when CBS scheduled the identical episodes for a standard summer rerun in August 1973, the entire American cultural landscape had fundamentally fractured. The catalyst for this sudden explosion wasn't anything new in the script. It was the Supreme Court's landmark Roe v. Wade decision in January of that same year.
He said, we have a show I would like you to do. He said, but it's a difficult show, and it's going to be a real breakthrough show.
Suddenly, a broadcast that was perfectly legal to air a few months prior became the ultimate lightning rod for a nation locked in a fierce ideological war. In an unprecedented move that caught CBS completely off guard, a massive coalition of 39 local affiliate stations across the country flat out refused to broadcast the summer reruns. This wasn't a case of corporate network censorship from the top down. This was a localized rebellion, prompted by aggressive, highly organized pressure campaigns from the United States Catholic Conference, individual church dioceses, and numerous Protestant denominations. Local station managers panicked. Clergy members flooded station phone lines, and religious groups weaponized viewer boycotts against local businesses that dared to buy commercial spots during the time slot. Behind the scenes, Norman Lear was stunned by the sudden, aggressive shift in temperature. As he later noted in interviews, the political climate had evolved so rapidly that cultural groups opposing the Supreme Court's ruling were desperately searching for a high-profile target, and Maude was the biggest one on television. The historic August 1973 blackout established a chilling new precedent in broadcasting the reality that a television program could be perfectly acceptable one day, only to be deemed completely untouchable. The next based purely on a shifting political tide. For years afterward, these episodes were effectively locked away in a regional lottery. Depending entirely on the zip code you lived in, the network signal was forcefully replaced with dead air or syndication filler.
It ain't willing to give his life for his country. You know what he deserves?
Death!
Number 4. The controversial KKK episode. Missing from modern streaming platforms, All in the Family, 1977. By the time All in the Family rolled into its 8th season in late 1977, producer Norman Lear had already dragged prime-time audiences through nearly every taboo subject in America. But the shocking 2-part episode, Archie and the KKK, directed by Paul Bogart, took the series into its darkest, most uncomfortable territory yet. Set against the chaotic backdrop of the real-life 1977 New York City blackout, the plot kicks off when Mike Stivic, Rob Reiner, writes a controversial letter to a local newsletter about looting. At his saloon, Archie Bunker Carroll O'Connor loudly vents his own frustrations within earshot of 2 bar regulars, Gordy and Mitch. Misinterpreting Archie's typical rants, they invite him to a meeting of what they call the Queen's Council of Crusaders. Failing to realize that the initials explicitly spelled out K, Archie tags along, genuinely believing he is simply joining a neighborhood civic watch group.
A lot more out of his life if he didn't have these burdens on him and these things that have poisoned his life.
The atmosphere turns chillingly dark when the members suddenly pull out their white hoods and robes, laying out a sinister plan to burn a cross on Mike's front lawn. The second half of the episode shifts away from comedy entirely, forcing Archie into a slow, terrifying reckoning. He has to confront the horrifying reality that the regular guys he was laughing and drinking with at the bar are actually members of an organized white supremacist hate group. Archie spends the rest of the storyline frantically trying to secretly thwart the cross burning, all while desperately trying to conceal from Mike and Edith Jean Stapleton that he ever stepped foot in the meeting. While the episode managed to air on CBS without major network interference in 1977, it has faced a very different kind of quiet censorship in the digital age. In recent years, streaming platforms have repeatedly scrubbed the 2-part storyline from their packages. For instance, both episodes were notably missing from Amazon's Freevee streaming library, leaving a glaring, unexplained gap in the Season 8 lineup. Decades later, Archie and the KK remains one of the most fiercely debated entries in sitcom history, highly praised by critics for its raw look at how ordinary people drift into dangerous extremism, yet heavily criticized by others who felt Archie Bunker was granted an unearned redemption arc.
After all, I don't even know you. Well, because that's the way it's always been with our people. We gotta look after them.
Number 3. The unresolved 1973 car episode delayed by network hesitation, All in the Family 1973. Most episodes of All in the Family wrapped up with a fragile truce, an imperfect understanding, or at least a standard sitcom laugh line. But in early 1973, producer Norman Lear shattered that safety net with an installment so profoundly shocking that CBS executives panicked and delayed its broadcast for weeks. The Season 3 episode, Archie is Branded, written by Vin Bogart and co-directed by John Rich and Bob Lehendro, plunged the Bunker household into a terrifying real-world nightmare. The plot ignites when Archie Bunker Carol O'Connor wakes up to find a swastika painted on his front door. While Archie dismisses it as a childish prank, Mike Stivic Rob Reiner quickly realizes their home was mistaken for the residence of a prominent Jewish school board member living nearby.
Said our pleasantries. We didn't get off the first page before I knew. My God, this was Archie Bunker.
The stakes escalate when Paul Benjamin, played by guest star Gregory Sierra, arrives at the house representing a fictionalized Jewish vigilante group modeled directly after the real-world Jewish Defense League. In an unexpected twist of character dynamics, Archie, who spent seasons casually trafficking in ethnic slurs, finds a strange common ground with Paul over a shared distrust of authority and a belief in projected strength. What follows is a raw, masterfully written ideological debate between Mike, who advocates for peaceful protest, and Paul, who firmly defends direct, forceful action against hate groups. Improbably, Archie sides with the vigilante. The episode builds toward the most violent and unprecedented ending in 1970s sitcom history. After saying a polite goodbye to the bunkers, Paul walks out to his vehicle. Seconds later, a devastating car bomb planted by the extremists detonates off-screen, killing him instantly. The episode ends in complete, unresolved trauma. There is no final punchline, no comforting moral lesson, and no restoration of order. Shaken by the sheer violence of a character being murdered in a half-hour comedy, CBS frequently omitted the episode from rerun packages for decades, solidifying it as one of the most heavily debated and suppressed broadcasts of the era.
Okay, come on. You're gonna answer it. And you're gonna get rid of him as fast as you can. You're not gonna arouse any suspicion, otherwise my...
Number 2. The birthday episode. Local affiliates refused to air All in the Family 1977. All in the Family spent years redefining primetime television, but nothing prepared the nation for the hour-long broadcast that aired on October 16, 1977. In the two-part episode, Edith's 50th birthday, what begins as a light-hearted celebration quickly mutates into a living nightmare. While Archie, Carol, O'Connor, Mike, and Gloria are next door preparing a surprise party, Edith Bunker Jean Stapleton is home alone, baking her own cake when a man knocks on the door posing as a police detective. Played with chilling, sociopathic precision by guest star David Dukes, the intruder forces his way inside and attempts to brutally rape Edith in her own living room. In a frantic, agonizing struggle for survival, Edith manages to shove a blazing hot cake pan directly into his face and escape, collapsing into her family's arms in pure trauma.
I love Edith. I think probably that's my most favorite. There's a play that I did in...
Behind the scenes, the preparation for this broadcast was entirely unprecedented for a 1970s sitcom. Producer Norman Lear originally conceived the harrowing storyline for the sitcom One Day at a Time, intending for the character of Anne Romano Bonnie Franklin to be the victim. However, Lear deliberately moved the script to All in the Family because he wanted to strike a profound societal chord that sexual assault could happen to anyone, even a beloved, innocent housewife like Edith. To ensure the subject was handled with clinical accuracy and utmost responsibility, Lear embedded Gail Abarbanel, the founder of the Rape Treatment Center at Santa Monica Hospital, directly into the production process. The network even hosted exclusive advanced screenings for law enforcement and hospital staff across the country before letting the footage hit public airwaves. The episode, written by Bob Schiller and Bob Weisskopf and directed by Paul Bogart, was a dramatic masterpiece, ultimately earning Bogart an Emmy for Outstanding Directing and a lead actress win for Stapleton. Yet, it left behind a deeply haunting legacy. Because the show was filmed before a live studio audience who didn't initially comprehend the horrific gravity of the scene, the broadcast audio tragically captured pockets of audience laughter during the early moments of the assault. This stomach-churning juxtaposition of standard sitcom laughter and raw terror deeply unsettled generations of viewers. Horrified by the brutal realism, dozens of local affiliates flat-out refused to rerun the episodes in syndication for decades, pioneering a broadcast that TV Guide would later rank at number 64 on its list of the 100 most memorable moments in TV history.
Not a word, not a word. If Arthur Harmon found out that at my age I was pregnant, he'd laugh himself sick.
Number 1. The 1972 groundbreaking broadcast that stopped the country cold, Maude, 1972. In September 1972, Maude debuted on CBS as a sharp, boundary-pushing spin-off of All in the Family, created by the legendary Norman Lear, and starring the powerhouse B. Arthur as Maude Findlay. The sitcom introduced an unapologetically independent, fierce, and liberal woman who completely commanded prime-time television. But just a few weeks into its freshman season, the show dropped a narrative bomb that changed broadcasting history forever. The historic two-part episode, Maude's Dilemma. At 47 years old, already a mother and a grandmother, Maude discovers she is unexpectedly pregnant.
People just assumed that I was, the staunchest feminist, which I was not.
Following a remarkably mature kitchen table conversation with her husband Walter, played by Bill Macy, Maude makes a choice that had never been spoken aloud by a leading character on a major network. She decides to undergo an abortion. What made the November 14th and 21st, 1972 airings so volatile was the explosive, real-world timing. The episodes broadcast just 2 months before the Supreme Court handed down its landmark January 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling, dragging a deeply taboo topic right into millions of American living rooms. While the initial winter airing generated relatively modest protests, the summer 1973 reruns ignited a massive cultural wildfire. With the political temperature of the nation at an all-time high post-Roe, religious groups and anti-abortion coalitions heavily targeted the sitcom. Terrified corporate sponsors frantically pulled their advertising dollars, and a whopping 39 local CBS affiliate stations staged a full network blackout, completely refusing to air the reruns. Norman Lear later reflected that it wasn't just the subject matter that terrified executives, but Maude's steady, unapologetic tone. She made her own choice without weeping or begging the audience for forgiveness, sealing the episode's legacy as the ultimate before and after milestone in television history. Whether they were officially banned, quietly skipped over by panicked local affiliates, or systematically erased from syndication schedules for decades, these controversial broadcasts left a permanent mark on American culture. They didn't just air, they invaded living rooms, forcing millions of unsuspecting viewers to sit with raw, real-world issues they had absolutely no idea how to process. Looking back, what makes this era so remarkable is how these forbidden episodes have aged into monuments of television history. The profound discomfort they caused wasn't an accidental misstep. It was a deliberate, creative weapon. Mastermind producers like Norman Lear and Susan Harris recognized that the traditional sitcom format and its comforting laugh track gave them the perfect cover. They knew audiences would stay glued to their seats through incredibly heavy subject matter, entirely because the format promised that a relieving punchline was just around the corner. But sometimes, that relief never came. And that was exactly the point. If you were sitting on the couch when these historic episodes first hit the airwaves, you already know firsthand that the experience was unlike anything before or since. And if you are just discovering them today, their raw power remains entirely intact. The discomfort hasn't faded with time. It was baked into the scripts from the very beginning. If you found this deep dive into television history worth your time, please like this video and subscribe to the Cambodia channel right now. There's a lot more hidden broadcasting history to dig through, and we'll keep going.